We leave it now to take you live to Plastow, New Hampshire for a campaign town hall with Republican presidential candidate Lindsey Graham. The senator is accompanied by Senator John McCain today. We also plan to take your phone calls after this live Road to the White House coverage on C-SPAN.
Two distinguished senators, and at this point, I'd like to welcome and introduce Senator John McCain.
Thank you for that long and elaborate introduction. Yeah. Thank you. Once I heard a story about Henry Kissinger. A guy said, "Here's a man who needs no introduction," and Henry said, "Yes, but he enjoys it." So thank you, and thank you for
Sit down here. Come down here. Got a seat. Come on. Yeah.
Thank you for your hospitality, and obviously it's always a great, incredible pleasure for me to be in New Hampshire, my second state, where I've been so fortunate to have so many friends. It's always very nostalgic, especially as we get closer to the most important primary of our nation. And one of the things that's so wonderful is that the people of New Hampshire take their participation and each person's vote with the utmost seriousness. I had a predecessor named many Arizonans have come to New Hampshire to run, and not all of them have succeeded. None of them have become president, but other than that, it's okay. Morris Udall was his name. He was an old Arizonan Democrat, some may remember him. One guy in New Hampshire said to another guy in Concord, said, "What do you think about Mo Udall for president?" He said, "I don't know, I only met him twice." And my other favorite Mo Udall story that has been stolen by many who ran up here, a guy walked into a barbershop in Manchester and said, "Hi, I'm Morris Udall from Arizona, and I'm running for president of the United States." And the barber said, "Yeah, we were just laughing about that this morning." So I want to thank all of you. And just for a few minutes, because I know we need for you to hear from Lindsey. I'm privileged to serve as chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I promise you that the world has never been in more crises and more threats than at any time since the end of World War II. The events in San Bernardino certainly authenticated that. And we don't have a leader. We don't have a leader who leads. It's a leader who continues to want to withdraw from the world stage. A leader who refuses to acknowledge that these are radical Islamic terrorists. He even refuses to acknowledge that. And my friends, we will suffer another attack on the United States of America if we don't change what we are doing. And I regret deeply to tell you that, but I can also tell you that this guy and I predicted what has happened. As we've watched America fail to lead, a president who thinks because if you withdraw from wars that wars end. When the United States withdraws, bad things happen. Now this guy has served 33 years in the United States Air Force Reserve. That is really good news. The bad news is he was a lawyer. Okay? All right. You know the difference between a lawyer and a catfish. One is a scum-sucking bottom dweller, and the other is a fish.
I can't believe we lost a lawyer, but
33 years, 35 trips to Iraq and Afghanistan, to Kabul and Baghdad, months and weeks serving as active duty in places like Bagram, where so many of these evil people are kept. So many times he spent with the troops and the men and women who are serving over the holidays, every Christmas and 4th of July. The times demand leadership. I don't know of anyone who is more qualified to lead this country in these significant challenges we are facing today. My friends, I've seen the polls. Lindsey's seen the polls. I'm asking you to ask your friends to have a look. Just have a look. And who is most qualified to lead this nation when there are direct threats and already attacks on the United States of America. I believe in Lindsey Graham. I think you will too. And I also am here to also translate his comments into English. Thank you all very much.
Well, let's see if we can find something we all agree on. John McCain is an American hero by any definition. We've actually been to Iraq and Afghanistan 36 times. Almost every time with him. What can you say about John? He's lost 4 airplanes. One short of being a black ace. Probably should have been dead 10 times. Could have come home early, chose not to. Spent 5.5 years in a prison camp and missed a lot of Christmases. But the first thing he will tell you that one of the highlights of his life was being in that prison camp with other American heroes. And I think that's what I like most about John, that he moves on, that he just keeps moving on. He led the way to try to normalize relationships with Vietnam. Says all you need to know about Senator McCain. He always puts the country first. As to the young lady who introduced me, thank you very much. I've been in your home. I've done this the New Hampshire way. This is her husband. Stand up. They have a son who's serving in the military. The bottom line is this is the New Hampshire way. Don't ever lose this. The country would suffer if the New Hampshire primary went away. It's the last place you can go to somebody's house, and if you get 20 people, you feel like, wow, we knocked it out of the park. But, you know, neighbors, father-in-law, father, talking about what I heard at the house party, a library where you got 30 or 40 people trying to figure out who would be the best person to lead a great country. And when you vote up here, you're going to give some people wind to their backs, and other people are going to hit a wall. And it's the filtering process of New Hampshire that is the last best hope of democracy. Millions of dollars will be spent up here. I won't be spending them. If you want to get money out of politics, join my campaign. So the whole process of early primary states is in jeopardy with national polling. I've had a hard time getting on the big stage just because of national polling. If you never run for president before, you come from a small state, you don't have your own TV show, you don't come from a political family, it's hard to get known. And I think we've started a process that undercuts New Hampshire, Iowa, and South Carolina. Because if you got X amount of dollars to spend, you got to worry about your national poll numbers, not coming here and meeting people. So I hope the RNC will reconsider this down the road, because it does undercut what you're all about. John McCain came back from the political dead twice. He was 5th in a 4-person race in New Hampshire after the Straight Talk Express blew up. He came here and he did 100 town hall meetings, and he came back because he had a message about winning a war we couldn't afford to lose, and people in New Hampshire put him back in the game. Never lose this. Fight for your primary. How many of you have been to South Carolina? Come back, spend money. You know why I'd be a good president? My dad owned a bar. A liquor store and a pool room. Everything I need to know about foreign policy I learned in the pool room. When I was a kid, I literally ran the pool room. We lived in the back of the restaurant bar in one room, my sister, my mom, and my dad, until I was in high school. That's the first time we really ever had a house. It was a small room. We all lived in the same room. No bathtub, no shower. Anybody ever take a bath in a metal wash tub? That turned out fine. The key is not how big the house is, but what goes on inside the house. We were well loved, my sister and myself. My parents gave me the one thing you want from your parents: unconditional love. Some discipline, but a lot of love. And so, about that experience. If you own your own business, you get up and go to work every day whether you feel like it or not. Anybody own your own business? Just think about it. You can't get sick. If you don't open up, you don't get paid. 6 days a week, Sunday was the day off, and it was a good life, but it was a hard life. The liquor store, the restaurant, and bar was all in one big building there, and the pool room was downstairs. So I am going to college, first in my family to ever go to college. Anybody in that boat? Neither one of my parents finished high school. They were so proud of me when I got in college. Life was pretty good. We went to Disney World on our first vacation in 1975. It was like going to Mars for us. I mean, getting on a plane, going to Florida. It was a dream come true. Come back, my mom starts getting sick. She's diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, and less than a year later, she passes. You go from the best of times to like, wow. We were underinsured. We got wiped out financially. My dad was 17 years older than my mom. The bottom line is 15 months later, he dies. I'm 22. My sister's 13. I've lost both of my parents. If it weren't for family, friends, and faith, I wouldn't be here today. We moved in with an aunt and uncle who never made over $25,000 in their life in the textile plants. And they're all now closed, by the way. And they helped me raise my sister. I went back to college. If it weren't for Social Security survivor benefits, a check from my parents' contribution coming to my sister as a minor, we'd had a hard time paying the bills. If it wasn't for student loans, she wouldn't have gone to college. I retired from the Air Force this June after 33 years. 6.5 years on active duty. Well, thank you. Very kind of you. I didn't have the military career John McCain had, but I was proud of what I did. I was a military lawyer, prosecutor, defense attorney, and a judge. The best decision I ever made was join the Air Force. 6.5 years on active duty, 4.5 in Germany during the Cold War from 84 to 88. I get to see leadership up close, Ronald Reagan. You know why I became a Republican? As soon as I got on active duty, my pay went up by 25%. I liked Ronald Reagan. I said, I like this guy. So the bottom line is that's been a great experience. Traveling with John McCain has really been eye-opening. He is a world leader and figure. When he walks in a room anywhere in the world, and that's my phone, that's the flip phone that Donald Trump, don't ever give him your number. I'm sure that wasn't the Donald. Where were we? So anyway, me and McCain. So we're going all over the world. When John walks in a room, people respect him just like that because he's a man of his word. And if I ever get to be president of the United States, it will have a lot to do with him. If you think I'm ready to be president, it will have a lot to do with Senator McCain. I have learned a ton. So I want to talk to you about two real quick things. The war. Here's the 4 takeaways I've learned from this war. It's a war, a religious war. How many people believe that? It is. It's a religious war. It's not about Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, or Libya. It's about an ideology that can't be accommodated. They want to create a master religion for the world. The Nazis wanted a master race. Somebody better stop them. If you leave them alone, they're not going to leave you alone. That's one thing I've learned. On September the 10th, 2001, we didn't have one soldier in Afghanistan, not one dime of aid, didn't even have an embassy, and we got attacked anyway. Why? Because we won't bend to their will. So it's a religious war, and if you're going to win it, you need partners. You're never going to kill your way to victory. You have to have partners. The good news is that 90% of the people within Islam reject what they have to offer. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan with Senator McCain 36 times. Don't tell me they're all the same, because they are not. I've had a lot of friends get killed fighting radical Islam in Iraq and Afghanistan. Hope is that over time we will build up the societies over there to protect our homeland here. And that's the only way you're going to win this war, is build up others. It is a religious war, and the people who will win the war are within the faith themselves. It is up to us to help them with a capacity where they have the will to say no. And if you don't get that, you're never going to win this war. Number 2, you better hit them before they hit you. These are all kamikazes. They don't mind dying. They want to take you with them. You better find out what they're up to before they attack you. We need to repair intelligence systems that are being gutted. We need to have more people on the ground over there to listen. We'd be nuts to withdraw from Afghanistan because it's a great listening post. And if we'd had troops in Iraq, I don't believe Iraq would ever fallen apart. I'm convinced that we'd have sustained all of our gains. But American soldiers, diplomats, and intelligence people over there give us a chance to hear what's going on before it comes here. Does that make sense to you? Yeah, I don't care about your emails. You know, I tell you one thing, me and Bill Clinton have one thing in common. Neither one of us sent an email to Hillary. But I don't email, and I'm glad I don't, really. The bottom line is nobody's trying to listen to your private conversations with the NSA program. What we're trying to do is find out if a terrorist is calling into the United States, who they're calling. And with a court order, find out what they're talking to. Does that make sense to you? If we can find a terrorist overseas and we get their phone number once we capture them. We want to go through the list and see who they've called. And if there's a match between a number over there and a number here, we want to try to find out what they're talking about through a judge. If you're not willing to do that, you're going to get hit here. Now, I'm convinced we'd had that program in place before 9/11. There wouldn't have been a 9/11. So you got to hit them before they hit you. That means good intel. The next thing you got to do is pick the battlefield. Do you want to fight in their backyard or yours? I prefer to fight the war over there, hadn't you? Well, how do you fight a war if none of us are over there? So you need more American boots on the ground to keep the war from coming here. And the only way you're going to win this war is build up others. So I'm not talking about 100,000 troops going back to Iraq. I'm talking about 10,000 versus 3,500 to give us an edge over ISIL inside of Iraq. Syria is hell on earth, folks. There's nobody really left to train. The Kurds are limited in what they can do. John and I proposed a regional army. How about using their armies this time instead of ours? Make them pay for this war. We paid for the last two. ISIL's coming after them just as much as they're coming after you. So there's an alignment of interest here. So the Arabs and Turkey, I think, would go into Syria to destroy ISIL with our help, and they need our help. 90% them, 10% us. But they're not going to fight ISIL if you leave Assad in power, because he's a puppet of what country? Iran. Are you one? I don't want to give another Arab capital to the Iranians. The Ayatollah is a religious Nazi. I don't want to empower him anymore. This deal with Iran is a nightmare for you. You're giving the Ayatollah $100 billion without him changing his behavior. He's got a missile to deliver the nuclear weapon he's going to build one day. Other than that, it's a good deal. So the bottom line, folks, is we need a presence over there. We need to end this war in Syria and Iraq before it comes here. Another 9/11 is in the making. We just got back and we were briefed about the terrorist attack, and it scared the heck out of me, how sophisticated it was. And the next 9/11 is being planned in Iraq and Syria by ISIL leadership, and my goal is to go in there and disrupt their operation so they can't hit us here at home, take their land away from them, destroy the caliphate, and hold it. The last thing is, if you don't have determination and will, you're going to lose. You got to be more determined than the enemy. You got to have will to see this thing through. It's a generational struggle. If we'd left Germany and Japan after World War II, only God knows what would have happened. So if you're looking for an easy way forward, I don't offer it. If you're looking for a plan to win, I've got it. And I'm seeking victory, not containment. And over time, we will win, because radical Islam is on the wrong side of history. Just how many people have to die between now and then? Debt. You got more debt than your kids can ever pay off. Somebody better fix that, or we could become Greece, right? What drives the debt? Baby boomers. Anybody here born from 46 to 64? Anybody here born after 64? Good luck. You're going to need it. So, I'm a baby boomer. We're going to retire here fairly soon. We're going to want our Social Security checks paid and our Medicare bills honored, right? In 1950, there were 16 workers for every retiree. Today, there's 3. In 20 years, that'd be 2. Strom Thurmond had 4 kids after he's 67. Are you willing to do that? If not, we better find a way to fix this problem. So the bottom line is, if you want to keep the country from becoming Greece, do what Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan did. Remember those two guys? They started drinking, which would be a good way to find bipartisanship. I'd open up a bar in the White House, get everybody liquored up, and we'd solve a problem. But they adjusted the age retirement from 65 to 67 to save Social Security. We got to do it again. Younger people work a little bit longer, because we live longer. People my income level, I make $175,000 a year. If I gave up a little bit, that would help fix the system, and I would. Because when I was 22, I needed every penny. Now I've got a military retirement, a congressional retirement, a 401k plan. I'm in good shape. I would give some of my COLA up and shave off some of my benefits to save it for people who need it more than I do. Half of today's seniors being poverty line Social Security check. Social Security is worth saving. If you'll do something like Simpson Bowles, have you heard of that? Bipartisan plan, flatten out the tax code, eliminate deductions, pay down debt, adjust the age of retirement, means test benefits, will save the country from becoming Greece. You can't get there unless both parties work together. Ronald Reagan proved it could be done. Tip O'Neill proved that a Democrat could work with a Republican. I intend to try to do that. The biggest knock on me by some is that I work with Democrats. I think my biggest asset is I work with Democrats. Thank you for coming. Come on up here, John. Come on, John. Questions?
What about Assad?
What about Assad? I'll give you my take, and I'll let John give you his. Do you want the war in Syria to end? Do you want it to end? It will never end if Assad's in power, period.
So what happens after Assad?
It's going to get better, but it'll be hard at first. So 240,000 Syrians have been slaughtered by Assad. If you tell them he has to be their president, you're going to have Syria divided forever. Number two, no Arab is going to accept Assad in power. No Arab government, Turkey included, is going to accept a construct where Damascus is owned by Iran. Do you believe he's a puppet of the Iranians? He couldn't last 5 minutes without Iran or Russia. So if you want to keep the Mideast in turmoil forever, leave Assad in power. To those who believe Assad being in power is good for us, you have no idea what you're talking about. It means the war never ends. He's the biggest recruiting tool for ISIL. They're Sunni extremists. He's an Alawite aligned with Iran. If you want to keep this war going hot, keep Assad in power and have Iran running Damascus, because that will create turmoil in the whole region forever. Number three, Assad's the biggest benefactor of Hezbollah. Who's Hezbollah? It's a terrorist organization that threatens Israel. They kill Marines. The bottom line is that Assad being in power creates an imbalance in the Mideast that you can never fix. We'll make sure that the war in Syria never ends, and he's the biggest benefactor of a terrorist organization that needs to have less friends. The bottom line is, if we don't end this war, the king of Jordan and Lebanon are at risk. So what would I do?
That's the thing. After, if there isn't Assad, then what?
Here's first things first. ISIL is a direct threat to the homeland. Do you believe that? If they could, they would attack us. So let's destroy them. They're Germany. Yeah, they have. They would attack us hard. So a planned terrorist attack is coming our way, not some lone wolf event, if we don't take the caliphate away. So here's the good news. The Arabs in Turkey have finally woken up to the threat, because they're coming after these guys too. So I'd go in and take the caliphate down inside of Syria, using Arab armies with Turkey to hold the territory, because this is a Sunni area. Then I would turn to Assad and say, you're going, and allow the Syrian people to pick their successor, not the Iranian Ayatollah. Ask the Russians and the Iranians, do you want to fight the entire Arab world plus Turkey and Western powers to keep the butcher Damascus in power? And the answer is no. Propping him up is a bad deal for us. If you take ISIL down, then turn your attention to Assad, Russia and Iran will fold like a cheap suit, because they're on the wrong side of the entire region. And the best thing that can happen for you and everybody in this room is for Assad to be replaced by somebody in Syria chosen by the Syrian people, the Alawites who he represents. You've got to find a place for them. ISIL is not going to take over Damascus if we take Assad down. That's not happening, because the average Syrian is not a radical Islamist, not even remotely so. But taking Assad down means you got to have a political compromise to find a place for the Alawites. The Syrian people are by nature not radical. This is complicated. There are no good options left. If you'd listened to John McCain 3 years ago, we'd have fixed this and had it behind us by now. Every day we wait, and every day you hold on to illusions, is a bad day for America. To those who believe that Assad can stay in power and everything will be okay, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Could I just point out, our president, before taking a well-earned 2 weeks off vacation in Hawaii, trumpeted all of the successes that we have enjoyed under his presidency. I can't pick it up. The reason why we have ISIS is because of Bashar Assad. He is the godfather of it. Bashar Assad has murdered 250,000 of his own people. He's the reason why we have millions of refugees, because he's driven them out of his country. So now our delusional Secretary of State wants to make some kind of deal that leaves this guy in power. There's a moral underpinning to America's conduct of national foreign policy and national security policy. We reject getting into bed with people that would slaughter 250,000 of their own people. I'd love for you to see sometime the pictures that were smuggled out of Syria of the women and men and children who were killed by Bashar Assad's chemical weapons attacks. The lines of these dead children, it's heartbreaking. And John Kerry wants to have some kind of arrangement with them to keep him in power, and is now in Russia, is now his partner who has dismembered Ukraine. We are in crazy times. So in answer to your question, what you're getting at is what, so we take out Bashar Assad, so we drive ISIS out. What happens after that? The moral of the story is you can't walk away from conflicts. If we had walked away from Japan and Germany after World War II when those countries were devastated, God only knows what would have happened. We still have 38,000 American troops in Korea after the Korean War. Look at the miracle of Korea. That country was devastated when when it ended, and now it's the world's fifth largest economy because we were there. And what happened in Libya? Lindsey Graham, Joe Lieberman, and I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, which I'll be glad to see.
October 2010.
October 2010, after Gaddafi was killed, and said, look, you've got to do certain things. You have to have a free society. You have to take care of the weapons caches. You've got to get rid of these Misrata militias that are running around. You've got to come in there. I called Leon Panetta and I said, they've got 20,000 wounded. Send an American hospital ship over there. Anchor it in the Bay of Tripoli and help treat these wounded. They don't know how to care for their wounded. We went to a hospital where there was people with no arms and legs laying on beds. And so what did we do? We walked away. So everybody says, oh, we never should have gone into Libya. My friends, this Gaddafi is the guy that killed Americans by bombing a cafe in Berlin. So if the answer is that once Bashar Assad goes, once we defeat ISIL, then you bring in the other Arab countries, and they're rich, and they've got lots of money, the Gulf countries and the Sunni Arab countries, bring them in and help them stabilize that country. And then send Americans who can teach them how to build a democracy, can teach them how a civil society works, fund newspapers, do the things that are necessary to build societies that can function. And to say that just because it's an Arab country that they can't do that is something that I categorically reject that assumption. So the answer is, after these bad guys are killed, then you're going to have to engage in a massive country-building effort led by the other Arab countries, but assisted technically with the only country in the world that really knows how to develop democracies. And I just want to mention one other thing. This business of Iraq, we had it won. The surge had won, and they are lying when they say we couldn't have left troops behind. And I don't make that statement very often. They are lying. Right now, they said, well, we had to get the permission of the Iraqi parliament. Well, there's 3,500 Americans there now. Is anybody talking about going to their parliament? And one of the most interesting things happened of all, and I'll stop. About 3 days ago, our Secretary of Defense was in Baghdad. Now remember that ISIS has half their country. They have Mosul, their second largest city. You'd think they'd want some help, right? The Prime Minister in Baghdad rejected our offer of Apache helicopters and additional American troops. Why did he do that? Because the people that are now running Iraq are the Iranians. They're the Iranians. That, my friends, is an abject story of how we have failed after sacrificing so many brave American lives to win with the surge. And I'm sorry for the long.
That's good. That's good.
Senator Graham, mortgage interest deduction.
Right.
Foundation of home ownership for the middle class. When you're elected president, would you veto any legislation that eliminates the mortgage interest deduction?
I wouldn't eliminate it, but I'd put a cap on it. You want to get out of debt? The answer is yes. Wake up. We're not at a Bernie Sanders rally. All right, so we want to get out of debt. What dry? Yeah, there we go. 70% of federal spending is consumed by what? No. Medicare, Social Security, and interest on the debt.
And congressional salaries.
Then, yeah. In 2040, how much will Medicare, Social Security, and interest on the debt consume of federal revenues?
100%.
100%.
More, yeah.
So the military budget is 20% of the federal budget, going down over time. So here's Simpson Bowles. Have you heard of Simpson Bowles? Sounds like a law firm. Here's the deal. How do you get a Democrat to adjust the age of retirement? If you don't, Medicare and Social Security is going to fall apart. We're going to ask younger people to delay entering the program by a couple of years, which takes pressure off the funds. You're going to ask people like me to give up some benefits or pay a little more into Medicare, and I would. Not anything draconian, but if a lot of us do it in the upper income levels, then we can buy the time to get the baby boomers through the system. Now, how do you get a Democrat? You're going to have to do revenue as a Republican. I'm not going to raise tax rates because that hurts what? Business, jobs. What does Simpson Bowles do? It flattens out the tax code. It actually lowers rates, but it eliminates most deductions. $1.2 trillion given out each year in the form of deductions. Mortgage interest is a popular one. Charitable giving is a popular one. The bottom line is interest for tax credits for college, child tax credits. All these things are popular. Here's what I would do. I'd put a cap on deductions, so at a certain income level you couldn't write things off, but there would be enough in that cap to write off the basic home mortgage. But you'd have to pick and choose which ones are most important for you rather than me picking for you. So if you put a cap on deductions, then you're going to generate some revenue coming back into the Treasury. I'd take that money to buy down rates and pay down debt. So I promise you that there would be a write-off for the average middle-class home deduction, but if you had two homes, one in Myrtle Beach and one up here, you probably couldn't write them both off.
Why didn't anybody in the Senate block the budget the other day?
Or to block it? You mean
was
the budget
was there
deal,
a
you
way
mean?
to block the budget?
Yeah, I guess if you got to get 60 votes to get it through. The process is broken. It really is awful, right? The reason we had to do it this way is we couldn't get any Democratic support for doing the appropriations process individually. There are 13 accounts that fund the government. The Defense Department, mine's the foreign operation. You know, you got 13 separate accounts. The best way to run the Senate is to do each account separately, right? An omnibus is what happens when you can't do the 13 accounts, so you have to throw it all in one big heap. Who wanted to shut the government down?
The Democrats.
Well, nobody really. You got a Democratic president, so he's not going away. He's got priorities. We've got a House majority, about 40. And if you get 40 votes in the Senate by Democrats, you can't get a bill through. So this whole bill was a process of negotiations. It spent more money than we liked, but at the end of the day, it put $40 billion in the military we desperately needed over 2 years. But it's an example of what's wrong with the government. I want John to tell you what happened in the appropriations process. This is what happens when you spend all the money at the end of the year in one big bill. And John has been on good government more than any single person I know. If John were king, he'd be benevolent with a random streak of cruelty. But the bottom line is that we need to run it more like a business. Next year, we don't need to find ourselves in this spot. At the end of the day, we had to get the government funded. There are Democrats you got to deal with. And every time a conservative refuses to vote for the budget because it's not pure, that means you got to go buy a Democrat. So all these people who never want to vote for running the government, well, somebody's got to run the government. We happen to be in charge. So you got to go find a Democrat. And that drives up the price of government. Now, they get the purity of saying I voted no, but somebody actually has got to make the government run. But John will give you an example of why we need to change this process.
I'm proud of a lot of things that a Republican-controlled Congress has done. For the first time, we've reformed education. We did away with this Common Core. We put the control of education out of the hands of the bureaucrats in Washington and back to the local school boards and the governors and the states where they belong. We had a budget for the first time in 6 years. We passed a defense bill which is fundamentally reforming the system. We now put a repeal of Obamacare on the president's desk. We passed it in both houses of Congress through the budget, and he'll veto it. But we promised the people that if you put the Republicans in charge of both houses, we'll send it there.
The pipeline, we passed the Keystone Pipeline, he vetoed it.
The pipeline, he vetoed again. But there's a number of things that we did I'm proud of. I'll tell you what I'm ashamed of, is what we did on the defense money bill. Remember, in Congress, we have the authorizing committee. That's the committee I'm the chairman of, Armed Services Committee. And what we do is we make the policies. We say how much should be spent on certain programs, what those programs should be, what pay and benefits for the military, all the things that have to do with it. But the money has to come from the Appropriations Committee, okay? This Appropriations Committee is the worst example of pork barrel, earmark, outrageous, disgraceful, shocking corruption. Okay? I'll give you an example. A senator from Alabama, Senator Shelby, put in $225 million for a ship made in Alabama that nobody wanted. $225 million of your money, and that's the second year in a row that he's done it. No authorization, no ability to do so. We are now dependent on Vladimir Putin's rocket engines, okay, to launch we cut that off in the authorizing committee. We cut it off. We said no more. No more. We're not going to keep giving money to Vladimir Putin. Well, those rockets are made in Alabama. The senator from Alabama lifted that cap, so now we will now be giving tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to Vladimir Putin for his Russian engines. Do you know that right now we are dependent on Russian rocket engines for anything that goes in space? That's not exactly true, but we are still, according to that. I could name you about 10 other provisions that were jammed in there in the middle of the night without any vote, without any discussion or debate, and we had to take it or leave it. I chose to leave it.
There we go.
This is kind of a two-part question. What is the difference between ISIS and ISIL?
Good question. Okay, that's one. You got another part to it?
No, after you answer.
Okay. Smart. Okay, Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. That means they're located and their goal is to do what? Deal with Iraq and Syria. ISIL is Islamic State in the Levant. Go to the go to the website and use my flip phone, it won't help you. And look up what the Levant means. Look at the countries in the Levant. Why did they say ISIL? They want to go beyond Iraq and Syria. It's not that I want them to go there, I just want you to know what you're in for. And this is the only thing me and Obama apparently agree on. They want to do more than Iraq and Syria. The big prize is Jordan. He's our last best ally. So the bottom line is, when I hear one of our guys saying that they admire Russia, count me out. Russia under Putin is nothing to be admired. Mr. Trump, go to the Ukraine. John and I'll take you. We've been there a bunch. They love John McCain because he's a voice for freedom. And listen to the Ukrainian people and let them tell you what it's like to deal with their neighbor Putin. Come with me and Senator McCain to Turkey and Jordan to go to the refugee camps and meet the women who've been gang raped and the orphans whose families have been killed by barrel bombs, supported by our friend Mr. Putin. So the reason I mention this is that this goal of ISIL is beyond Iraq and Syria. And if we don't bring stability to the Mideast, they're going to keep going. They're in Libya today. So when our president tells us things are good, bull. They're in Afghanistan today. They're coming here tomorrow, figuratively. I want you to understand that these people want to create a master race for that region, eventually for the world. They're nuts. I don't know why Hitler wanted to kill all the Jews, but he did. And he wrote a book. And they're telling you what they're going to do, and somebody better stop them. And back to your question, if you think keeping Assad in power, helps us, you have no idea what that means for our long-term national security interest. It is the single worst thing you could propose in terms of defeating ISIL. It means they never go away. So that's why I call it ISIL, because I want to tell you what they're going after.
Could I just mention that you'll hear from time to time some of the Arab leaders call them Daesh. That is a derogatory word, Arab word for terrorists. So you'll hear that.
I just want to let you know where they're headed.
Got another question? I thought you said you had two questions.
Yeah.
You may not get Social Security, so take your chance.
The other part of the question is that if they're starting to take over, like Middle East, possibly the world, why don't the allies people from Europe, like England and stuff, help?
That's a good question.
Why don't we do that?
Did you hear that question? Why don't people take this threat as seriously as John McCain and Lindsey Graham? They're war weary. How did you get World War II? People were tired after fighting World War I. The entire world gave Hitler a pass. This is not the first time this has happened. They went to Munich, peace in our time. They misjudged the guy on the other side of the table. This happens a lot. Good people like us in Europe get tired of fighting bad people. Guess what? Hitler seized upon the weakness of the West. John Kerry would crawl on his knees through glass to get a deal with Russia about anything. History's repeating itself here, folks. This deal with Iran is a nightmare. Everybody lined up behind it. What do you think they're going to do with the $100 billion they've gotten? They're going to build schools? You think they'll build a library? I don't think so. Why do they want a ballistic missile? To put Iranian in space? This is the 70th anniversary of the end of the Holocaust. If you told somebody in 1946, by 2015, the world would have done a deal with a radical Islamic terrorist nation, an Ayatollah who's a religious fanatic, to give them a pathway to a nuclear weapon, a missile to deliver it, and money to pay for it, they would have laughed at you as, no, you couldn't have forgotten the war that quickly, could you? On the day we voted on the Iranian deal, the Ayatollah tweeted out, Allah willing, within 25 years, Israel will be no more. The difference between the Ayatollah and Hitler is that Hitler lied to Chamberlain. At least Chamberlain can say he lied to me. The Ayatollah, he lied to you. He's saying, I'm still going to kill everybody in Israel. Death to America at the time we gave him the money. This is so insane. So why would the West and other nations, just like in World War II, pal, you see what you want to see. You hear what you want to hear. You get war weary and you believe all he wanted was more German-speaking territory and he'd be happy. If you think the Ayatollah is just wanting to be a member of the family of nations, you don't understand what he's doing. Look what he's done after the deal. 2 violations of UN sanctions and resolutions on testing a missile. Putting ground troops in Syria to help Assad to make sure this war never ends. Put another American in jail. And the IAEA report came out that they cheated when it came to the inspections at Parchin. They plowed up all the ground so that we couldn't find out about their nuclear testing. That's happened since the agreement. Somebody asked me, what would it take to get the hostages out of Iran? A president like Reagan. If you gave me $100 billion to negotiate with, I could get OJ out of jail.
So first of all, thank you for being bipartisan and putting the United back in the United States.
Oh, there we go.
Appreciate that. You touched briefly upon how scary it is to be uninsured and facing medical bills. Mm-hmm. What are you doing to reduce the number of people facing medical bankruptcy?
Okay, well, number one, I know what it's like to be sick and not have enough insurance and get wiped out. How many people want a balanced approach to health care where individuals have some responsibility, business has some responsibility, and the government has some responsibility? That's where I'm at. If you turn it all over to the government, you're going to get what the government gives you when they can afford to give it to you. We ain't going down that road. If you like that, move to Europe, where they got 2 tanks and a big healthcare system. At the end of the day, we need to reform healthcare, make it affordable, make it available, and improve quality. How many people believe in competition? We apparently do in the Republican Party. We have 29 people running for president. Here's my view. If you smoke, you ought to pay more. Okay, a little personal responsibility here. Health savings accounts to pay for your deductibles. Use the tax code to give you some money to purchase products in the healthcare industry as an individual where you'll have some ownership of your purchases. If you keep yourself healthy, you can use the money for other things over time. Tie the consumer to the behavior. Medicaid. I want to help low-income individuals with health care, don't you? I don't want anybody out in the street. But why should they be allowed to run the emergency room every time they get a headache? You don't. Tie behavior. A little skin in the game. How about that? Buy insurance anywhere you want to buy it.
Just a point of fact. It's going to cost the uninsured person 10 to 20 times more for that same service than it costs an insured person. It costs like $8,000 for a CAT scan. TRICARE paid me $350.
Yeah, here's what I think. The uninsured person probably is not going to pay much, and the rest of us are going to pay for it. So that's why I want to cover everybody. Obamacare is not about 30 million uninsured. It's about getting everybody under government-run health care. They're trying to do through the back door what they can't do through the front door. And the way they're going to accomplish it, it makes it so expensive for the private sector to offer health care, they drop their coverage. Companies all over New Hampshire are reducing the number of hours people are covered by to avoid Obamacare cost. And they're not going to expand their business because if you get over 50, you're covered by Obamacare. And they're going to pay the fine under Obamacare rather than keeping insurance. And they're going to put everybody in the state in these exchanges that are monopolies. And the number of providers goes down, not up. That's what's coming. So the consolidation of health care under the government umbrella is the goal of Obamacare. My goal is to have it affordable, available, and improve quality. Buy health care anywhere in the country, not just New Hampshire. Open up networks to competition, individual responsibility, and to low-income people, I will help you pay your premiums. I will give you a chance to buy private sector coverage. I want more competition, not less. I don't want anybody to get sick and lose everything they've worked for. I believe in catastrophic insurance coverage when your deductibles are all gone away and you hit a ceiling because you get cancer or some catastrophic illness. I want a balanced approach, but this is about consolidating health care under the government umbrella, and that means over time less quality and more cost.
There's the flip side to that. It's not just the insurance costs, it's also the health costs. Yes. And nobody seems to be talking about how do we fix that problem.
Okay, the health cost. Diabetes, running rampant, right? Our kids are not being, okay, I don't believe in the nanny state, but anything we can do to have better diets, the better off we are. The NIH is being cut under these sequestration cuts. These across-the-board cuts to the discretionary budget are not going to balance the budget. They're going to destroy the military, but one thing nobody talks about is National Institute of Health. The National Institute of Health is a research body that's trying to find ways to deal with diabetes and Alzheimer's. If you want to tell me, I want to tell you the two things you need to watch for. Alzheimer's cost and diabetes are exploding. And the sooner we can control and find ways to delay and cure these problems, the better off we are. So health itself is something we need to focus on, outcomes. Rather than paying a doctor to do something or a hospital system to do something, how about paying them for an outcome? Let me tell you what happened in South Carolina. African American males suffer from diabetes larger than any group in all of South Carolina. So what we did, amputations among African American males were twice the population of the state as a whole from diabetes. So what we did is we started identifying African American males who were at risk for amputation with diabetes and sent nurses to their homes and put monitoring devices in their homes so we could better monitor their medicine and give them better health care outcomes. Guess what? We reduced amputations by almost 50%. Outcomes is what you're talking about.
Well, sort of, but I really was talking about the hospital and doctor costs. I mean, they're rampant. I mean, you know, $200 for an aspirin. I mean, that's...
Now, how is that? It's cost shifting.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. How many people here on Medicare? Tell you what, if you don't watch it, you won't be able to find a Medicare doctor. Because the reimbursement rates for Medicare are below their cost. Why? Because the government is broke, and it's our second largest expense. So if you don't open up Medicare to more revenue and more competition, it's going to be harder to find a Medicare doctor. Medicare Advantage, if you're a wealthy senior and you want to purchase something not covered by Medicare, the doctor can't provide it to you because they lose the ability to practice Medicare for 2 years. This one-size-fits-all has got to go. What would I do? I would allow somebody to purchase something outside of traditional Medicare, but the money has to go in the pot to increase the amount of money we have to deal with Medicare patients as a whole. So you would be able to buy something that the average person would not be able to buy. I'm okay with that as long as the money goes into Medicare. We're going to have to open up Medicare to new revenue sources. The bottom line is Medicare Part D. Have you heard about this program? Okay, it's a prescription drug program. The most anybody pays is $109 a month in premiums. Bill Gates and Lindsey Graham need to pay more than $109 a month. So what I would do is I would do away with a lot of the subsidies when it comes to Medicare. That money that we would pay into the system goes to keep the system operating, and we'll have more money for doctors and hospitals to stay in the system.
I was wondering what you and Senator McCain think we can do about North Korea. They've got nukes, they've got missiles. Now they said they have the hydrogen bomb, and no one seems to care about it.
All right, I'm going to come up here. North Korea, how many people think the guy's crazy? All right, let's start with that proposition. You're letting a crazy guy have nuclear weapons. Blame Republicans and Democrats for that outcome, because both parties have let it get out of hand. John McCain's been on North Korea from like day one. Here's the difference between North Korea and Iran. Japan and South Korea have never felt the need to get a nuclear weapon to counter the North Koreans because they trust us and they believe that North Korea is not going to invade their countries tomorrow. The guy's nuts, but he's not a religious Nazi. The difference between North Korea and Iran, if the Ayatollah gets one bomb, what happens in the Mideast? Every Arab's going to get a bomb too, unlike the Korean Peninsula. So North Korea is a nightmare. It should be a wake-up call. This is what happens when you let rogue regimes get away with bad deals and blame both parties here. The effort to control the North Korean nuclear program was a miserable failure. So will the Iranian nuclear deal be a miserable failure. If you could go back in time, wouldn't you do it differently? But we are where we are. And once they get a nuke, they're in a safe harbor because nobody wants to deal with them the same way if they didn't have a nuke. So North Korea sharing the technology worries me, that they will sell some of this stuff to terrorist groups, that the guy will wake up one day on the wrong side of the bed and might actually use it. I don't know how to fix that overnight other than press the regime over time to change, hoping that people in North Korea can take back their country and replace this nut job with somebody more stable. Now, I'll end with this and turn it over to John. Iran is a nightmare in the way, making worse than North Korea. If they get a nuclear weapon, you're going to start a nuclear arms race. And unlike North Korea, they have a religious agenda. Have you ever listened to the Ayatollah? He has an end of days concept in his version of Shia religion. They're very much like ISIL. They see the world coming to a climactic end with them in charge, trying to create chaos, not stability. You got to know who's on the other side of the table. The Ayatollah is not a good man. He's a religious zealot. The guy in North Korea is a nut. But unlike North Korea, Iran could set in motion Armageddon.
Just real quick, I'm sorry that the rotund ruler of North Korea recalled his all-female entertainment troupe that was going to entertain in Beijing. I'm sure the major networks heaved a sigh of relief because I'm sure they would have dominated the ratings if shown here in the United States. The key to North Korea, really, I agree with everything that Lindsey said, and I'm not going to repeat it, is China.
Yes.
China
Exactly
controls
right.
the economy
Exactly right.
of a destitute country. And why in the world the Chinese continue to prop up this regime, which is of the most brutal kind left on earth, with hundreds of thousands dying in their gulags, Stalinist gulags, is beyond me. One brief vignette, when the new ruler of China came to Washington, there was a meeting with 3 or 4 of us senators with him. And I said, why do you continue to prop up North Korea? A united Korea is no threat to China. There's destitution, there's hundreds of thousands. Anyway, after I finished his answer, he spoke in Chinese, interpreted by the interpreter, said, Senator McCain is very well known in China for his views. That was his answer. You know, I was really pleased to get that. But the key to North Korea, they're an anachronism.
Yes.
But they're a dangerous anachronism. And by the way, again, I want to point out, all of North and South Korea were the same in 1954 when it stopped. Look at what the difference between freedom and democracy and that form of government is. There is no better example of what a great success story, thanks to the United States of America, is all about.
One more question.
Senator, first off, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Second, we talked a lot about the Iran deal, and now that, you know, whether we disagree with it, it's been pushed through.
Right.
Assuming you become commander-in-chief, what are you going to do about it?
Okay, you can't police it. The first thing you got to get right as president's the big stuff. Like, we're in a religious war, right? I'd rather fight it over there than fight it here. You got to hit them before they hit you. If you don't have will, people won't follow you. So, the biggest mistake we made is let Assad cross that red line. The first thing you do as president is you never draw a red line unless you're willing to reinforce it. So Hagel's in the paper today talking about how that hurt us all over the world. When Assad said, don't cross this red line of using chemical weapons, you're going if you do, Assad clearly did, and he's still standing. John McCain and Lindsey Graham went to the Oval Office with Susan Rice and Barack Obama. They called us there to see if we would support their efforts to go after Assad after he crossed the red line, and John and I said yes. And the goal was to upgrade the Syrian opposition that was intact, degrade Assad, which means to take his air power away from him, and change the momentum on the battlefield so you get a political resolution minus Assad. He's never leaving if he's winning. So the day he thinks he's not going to win, he'll leave and we'll find a new Syrian leader. So the Iranian nuclear deal has to be looked at in terms of our overall foreign policy. That was a signal to Iran and Russia and China, the store's open, get as much as you can. What do? The first thing I would do as president is ask the Congress to give me one tool. That if you did business with Iran, you cannot use American banks. I think there would be enough support in Congress to give me that tool. You got to pick between a $450 billion economy in Iran and an $18 trillion banking system. I'd wait for the phone to ring, and these Western countries would start calling. And here's what I would say to the Ayatollah. If you want a nuclear power program, for peaceful purposes, you can have it. Mexico and Canada have power programs, but they don't enrich uranium. We'll supply the fuel so we don't have to worry about you converting the process into making a bomb. If that's all you ever wanted, then you can have it. How many people believe they actually want a power plant? How many people believe they want a bomb? Me too, and if you don't drive home because you're a danger to yourself and others. So the bottom line is, they actually want a bomb, not a power plant, but I'd call his bluff. I'd say you can have a power plant. Then what I would do, the sanctions are never going to be lifted, the banking embargo is never going to be lifted until you stop becoming the largest state sponsor of terrorism. I would take their behavior as a whole and tie it to the nuclear deal. And I would tell them this: if you keep doing what you're doing, we're going to grind you in the ground. If you try to break out, I'll stop you. If you want a war with us, you'll lose it. Give me a call. And if we're not willing to do that, we're going to set in motion, I think, chaos in the Mideast unlike any time you've ever seen. Any last questions?
Could I just tell you one quick story?
That's what I
Around
would do.
2005, we saw a terrible thing happening in Iraq, and that was these things called copper-tipped IEDs. They were the kind of IEDs that would penetrate right through a Humvee, and which really increased our casualty rate. And so Lindsey Graham and a couple others, but led by Lindsey Graham, went to the Pentagon and the president and said, look, we've got to get a better vehicle in there than the Humvee. They're shredding, and the casualties.
It's called the MRAP.
It's called the MRAP. The MRAP, thanks to Lindsey and others, but led by Lindsey, we went around the usual 10 to 15 year process of getting a piece of equipment into the field, and within a couple of months, they started getting these MRAPs in. Where did these copper-tipped IEDs come from?
They came from a guy named Qasem Soleimani. You may not know who that is. That's the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. He was the one that was sending these all in to Iraq. And General Dunford was our new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was asked in a hearing by Senator Cotton, how many Americans do you think were killed by these copper-tipped IEDs that Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, sent into Iraq? General Dunford said 500. Approximately 500 American soldiers and Marines were killed by these copper-tipped IEDs. At the hearing when Senator Kerry showed up before our committee, Senator Cotton asked Senator Kerry, I thought, a very good question. He said, 500 copper-tipped soldiers and Marines were killed by these. Tell me, Secretary Kerry, what do we tell the Gold Star mothers? Because Qasem Soleimani is now calling the shots in both Baghdad and Damascus. He's in charge. He's the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and he is now controlling both Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon, and moving into other places. This is the result of no leadership, and this is a leader that can lead.
I'm going to just, we all got to go. I got to do some shopping one of these days. The fact you would come here this close to Christmas means a lot to me. The fact that John McCain would come up here and endorse me for president is the highlight of my political life. Now,
John McCain to translate.
Yeah. I don't know where my campaign is eventually going to wind up, but I know this. I know who I am and why I'm running. And I'm optimistic. Putin has a pair of twos. His economy's the size of Italy. If I were president, we would export natural gas that we own in abundance by going finding it in an environmentally sound way. I'm tired of sending $350 billion a year overseas to buy oil and gas from people who hate our guts. So I'd become energy independent. I'd reinforce NATO. After I rebuilt our military, the first thing I would do as your commander-in-chief is to set aside these defense cuts and rebuild our military at a level consistent with the threats we face. The big deal has to be done or we become Greece. I would reach out to my Democratic friends and say, we can do better as Republicans and you can do better as Democrats. Let's save America while we still have time. Let's do the things that will save Social Security and Medicare because they're worth saving. Let's have a health care system that's has quality, affordability, and we can afford. I mean, access. The bottom line is, folks, none of these problems are insurmountable. The world is ready to be led. We just need to lead. If you get nothing else out of this meeting, ISIL is on the wrong side of history. Young people are not going to live in dictatorships for our convenience. They're live in peace with us and reject ISIL. I side with a young woman who wants to have a say about her children, who actually wants to get a job, be able to go to school. We're going to win this war, and the sooner America leads, the sooner it will end. And the people in the Mideast are going to be helped by us, but there will be a requirement they help themselves. Back here at home, without bipartisanship, our best days are behind us. With it, we're in great shape because most people are more screwed up than we are. China is a paper tiger in many ways. They need our economy more than we need theirs. I want to have a friendship with China, but no more building islands over resource-rich waters claimed by others because you can. I'm tired of being walked over, and it's dangerous when America doesn't lead. The next president needs to do two things. Reset world order. Lead from the front, not from behind, and bring us together. John McCain lost to Barack Obama And before he became president, we went to Chicago to meet with him. We were both somewhat hopeful that we could turn the corner. Rather than blaming President Obama, we are where we are. It was a missed opportunity. Do you all agree?
Yes.
Here's what I offer. I'm a proud Republican, but I'll put the country first. I had 6 primary opponents from mildly disturbed to completely insane. Because I work with Democrats on immigration. Somebody better work with Democrats on immigration to fix it. Because you're not going to deport 11 million people. But you can fix the system. You can get us out of debt. And we can win this war. But it's going to require leadership and some sacrifice. And the sacrifice that's going to be asked of most is those who are doing the fighting. I've walked in their shoes. I've done my homework. And I'm going to give them the ability to win and a plan that will lead to victory. They've had our backs. And the reason I'm running for president above all else is to be a commander-in-chief that will have their backs. Merry Christmas to you.
I'm going to go shopping in New
Yeah, I said that's a good reason to shop. Good question. Thank you. Good
You know why it is.
Sorry.
A little bit later than I usually go.
You guys can take each other.
God bless you. That's a lot of fun.
Hey.
No red side. I'm shameless.
Earlier they may be coming up to Connecticut, so.
Very nice. Yeah, they all came to our house.
I know that.
You want to get one in there too?
It's a household, because I know you had it on.
The only reason I wasn't the Eagle Scout, I got kicked out of the Cub Scouts.
If you move that to shore.
I always slept. How long were you?
I'm just a Reagan fan. Thank you. Best of luck to you, Senator.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Payne, thanks for coming.
You must be a real set guy.
You know it.
I think we'll put a cap on his but you don't want to. Yeah, no, but if I put a cap, he's kind of.
And if we sent the people in Syria out.
Thank you.
They did your support, but allowing refugees out. Oh my God, he was right. He was saying 90% of Muslims are
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you.
yeah, and we, yeah, the Jews, Japanese. Yeah. This is the same deal. This is American.
But I want to show that those families crossing the
But it's the us versus them, and at least it's not saying down. He's saying that's like I'm
I could probably work at 7.
Again, he's more of a voice of reason compared to some of the others.
Congratulations. You guys know
Thank you. Barbara Keisha.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Senator.
And for the elaborate introduction.
See your husband.
Thank y'all.
No, is that First Baptist? No. Oh, okay, all right. Because I think I've seen it with your social media. Yeah. So the ice creams and stuff. Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah. We love doing this. Now, are you active? I haven't seen you so much. Would you?
Republican presidential candidate Lindsey Graham in Plastow, New Hampshire, accompanied by Senator John McCain, as you see on your screen today. The first of several events we're covering in New Hampshire over the next couple of days here on C-SPAN as our Road to the White House coverage continues. Your calls now on what you heard today, and specifically we'd like to hear your thoughts on the Republican presidential candidates and what they're saying about foreign policy. The numbers on your screen for Republicans, 202-748-8921. Democrats, 202-748-8920. Independents, it's 202-748-8922. And a special line just for New Hampshire voters today, 202-748-8923. As we continue to watch Lindsey Graham talking with some of the folks that came out to this town hall event today in New Hampshire. He met up last night with Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush tweeting that he ran into these great Americans tonight in Manchester. Man, I love this state. And we will be covering Jeb Bush later on today. In fact, at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time in Windham, New Hampshire. We'll go live there for more Road to the White House coverage. And now, though, more of your phone calls. We go to Carol, who's joining us from Marblehead, Massachusetts, on the line for Independence as we continue to watch Lindsey Graham and the crowd in New Hampshire. Carol, go ahead with your thoughts.
Oh, hi. Thank you very much.
Sure.
It's an honor to talk about Americans, Lindsey Graham, all of them. And I think it's with the, I'm 70 years old, and I followed many wars. I was a student of the Vietnam War. I think it should be possible for all the Republicans that stay in the race to debate on the issues. I don't care if it's 15 of them. I think they should have an appropriate amount of time to debate their issues. I've known Lindsey Graham based on his history. I followed them all. And there's a lot of brain trust there. And I don't like the degrading of a candidate because of a percentage, because I think it's not fair to the candidate, and I don't think it's fair to the party. And I don't know what they're going to do to fix it. Now, on the international front, I've studied everything, and I've read books on historical stuff in the Middle East and everything. And you've got to have a strong grasp on the culture, not the religion, but the culture and whatever. And I think I'll give him kudos. Lindsey Graham has that grasp.
Thanks for calling. I should mention that you can tweet us your thoughts as well, the hashtag @CSPAN, or leave a post for us on our Facebook page. Continuing with your calls, Maureen on the Democrats line from Benton, Arkansas. What do you think of what the GOP presidential candidates are saying about foreign policy, Maureen?
Well, I really like what Lindsey Graham is saying. He seems to be well experienced on it, and I really hate that he's not up further in the polls. I think they're overlooking him, and I think the Republicans are making a big mistake by overlooking him.
All right, Marika in Albany, New York, Republican caller. Go ahead.
Hello. I am a registered Republican, but voted for Obama the last time with big regret. Just watched Lindsey Graham with John McCain. I believe he did a great job, very knowledgeable. And I think he should be presented on the large stage when they have the debate. He may have my vote. He came across really knowing the facts on the global scene, and he's very optimistic, which I think this country needs.
Another Republican caller, Diane in Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I'm 70 years old, and I've voted in every election, and I have never, ever once been polled. I don't understand how they get these numbers, and they can say this one gets this numbers and that one gets those numbers. Nobody has ever polled me, and I'm a registered voter. And, you know, I always thought that perhaps we needed somebody that was of the people, more or less like Carly, or somebody who was not in the government, not a politician that was a politician for life. But then I started listening to Marco and Cruz, and I was absolutely certain I didn't want a senator. They knew all the right things to say, but they just didn't have any heart for the people. And then I've listened to this Mr. Lindsey Graham. This is the second time I've watched him on these little town meetings, and he is absolutely marvelous. I cannot believe that man is not higher in the polls. I just can't hardly believe it. I wish they could get him into bigger crowds. He's in these little town meetings of 25, 50 people, and you see some of these others with 25, 50,000. Why isn't he getting that crowd? Why can't his supporters and his backers get him set up with a bigger crowd?
Your calls today on the GOP presidential candidate field and what they're saying about foreign policy. Let's go to Chris next in Pompano Beach, Florida, on the line for Independence. Hi, Chris.
Hello? Hello?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'd like the candidates to talk about the book, The 100-Year Marathon. It's about China, and it spells out our relationship with China, how it should be approached. And also, I'm very, very frustrated that it is so difficult to get these candidates to be straight and something so clear. Venezuela and Eritrea need to be placed on the terrorist sponsor list. They are very clearly oppressors and terrorist states. They need to be placed on the terrorist sponsors list.
Thanks for calling. We've been watching Lindsey Graham today, along with Senator John McCain, who has endorsed the Graham candidacy. Lindsey Graham in New Hampshire today, and we'll be back with Jeb Bush tonight. We're going to cover Chris Christie tomorrow night as we cover a couple of the presidential candidates while they're in the Granite State. And interestingly, WMUR-TV in New Hampshire tracking how the candidates, how they're spending their time in New Hampshire, and Lindsey Graham spending the most time of all the Republicans, 61 days. Now, this is updated as of December 10th. Lindsey Graham spent 61 days so far in 2015. He's followed by Chris Christie at 51, Carly Fiorina at 41, John Kasich at 39, Jeb Bush at 33. Down at the bottom, Marco Rubio 12, Ben Carson 11, Rick Santorum 7, and Mike Huckabee 2 days in New Hampshire in 2015. Back to your phone calls now. Lynn in Salem, New Hampshire on the line for Republicans. What do you think about what the Republicans are saying regarding foreign policy, Lynn?
Hi. I think that Lindsey Graham is leading the pack in what he's saying about foreign policy. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows I've been a big supporter of his from the beginning. He has been saying the same thing about foreign policy from the beginning of the race, unlike, some Johnny-come-latelys. And he is definitely the brain trust. I think he should be. I agree with the previous caller. He should be in the debates right up front, at least to provide this perspective. Whatever happens with his campaign, he's providing a very important perspective on foreign policy. I think we need to fight ISIL, where they are before they do more damage in our.
Thanks for calling. Jerry in Suitland, Maryland, a Democratic caller. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. I'm like I said, I'm a Democrat, but what Lindsey Graham says makes a lot of sense, especially about dealing with ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call those crazy people over there. I just think here's a novel idea. He just needs to be heard, and I hate this undercard thing they have with these Republican debates. It just some people get, it's making a judgment about how important one candidate is over another, and it's just wrong. Lindsey Graham needs to be heard, and so does John McCain. I like him too. And I just wanted to, here's a novel idea. If we had something like what I think Israel has, like a coalition government, we have maybe a Democratic president, of course, and a Republican vice president. That's all I got to say.
Thanks for calling. Kevin in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, on the line for Republicans. Your thoughts?
Yes, my name is Kevin Milch, and I believe that Lindsey Graham did a great job today. He really was informative, and I was basically going to vote for Carlson, but I'm taking a second look at Lindsey Graham because I do believe there's two parties in Congress and senators and all that, and they need to work together to get our country running the right way.
Thanks for calling. May have cut you off there at the end there, Kevin. Sorry about that. A couple of tweets from our viewers today. Dave tweeting us that Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, if you missed this, you missed a lot. And Hannah writing, Lindsey Graham, you may have many callers that agree polls don't reflect the will of the people. All running need to keep debating. And more of your calls now. Diane in Hollywood, Florida, on the line for Democrats.
Yeah, so as I listen to the debates and I listen to the Republican candidates, it doesn't seem at this point that there's any real facts that get out there. And I think what's really frustrating for average citizens that might vote Democrat, Republican, or down the middle, there's just, the Republicans are just devoid of any real fact-based information. And I think it's just incredibly frustrating that they're always attempting to show who's the strongest person, not necessarily what really makes the most sense. We're not carpet bombing people. We're not attacking people's families. That's against the Geneva Convention. Those are war crimes. And yet it doesn't seem like the press ever holds any of these people accountable for the false statements that they make.
Go to the Republican line. Deborah in Jasper, Missouri. What do you think about the GOP field and what they're saying about foreign policy, Deborah?
Well, I certainly agree that Lindsey Graham is very knowledgeable. I mean, the depth of his experience is shown in these meetings. But a telling thing for me was I was with my 78-year-old mother in a medical waiting room in an evening, and there were political shows on TV, and just a random woman in the group that's sitting there waiting pipes up and says, well, you know, they can all say whatever they want, but people are going to vote for names they know, and if you'll just watch, everyone knows Trump's name, everyone knows Clinton's name. So, you know, in this age of low information voters, I think the biggest challenge to getting the message out is how does the Republican Party penetrate to those areas where those low information voters are getting their little dab of information. Thank you.
Thanks for calling. Go to Anthony now in Flint, Michigan on the line for Independence.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
Hey, we've been watching all of this stuff, and what's going on is crazy. I'm a former Marine, and it seems that all Republicans trump it up as going to war with somebody when we have issues here, like in Flint. We've got all kinds of infrastructure problems with the water, and these candidates aren't interested in helping the people who actually need the help here in the United States. The Republican platform has not discussed anything to do with infrastructure in real terms. They've been talking about going to war. They've been scaring all these white folks. And it's just amazing how they get away with saying, well, we need to go over there, we need to do this. Look, we've been over there now close to 40 years. We've lost 241 Marines in Lebanon. We've been warned with and put this. We're not crazy. We see what the Republicans are doing, and Hillary needs to really get to the bottom of what needs to be done here and help our veterans. Thank you.
Thanks for your call. Our Road to the White House coverage continuing in New Hampshire today. Lindsey Graham this morning, later on Jeb Bush, Chris Christie tomorrow. Of course, New Hampshire, one of the earliest of the primary states. In fact, the first 4 caucus and primary states on the Republican side. February 1st, the Iowa caucuses. February 9th is the New Hampshire primary. February 20th, the South Carolina primary. And the Nevada caucus is on February 23. The list there, the first 4 major events for the Republicans voting-wise after the first of the year. Today, your thoughts, this morning, your thoughts on the GOP presidential candidates and what their comments are and positions are on foreign policy. You heard from Lindsey Graham. What do you think of what you heard from him today and the other candidates in the GOP field? To Kissimmee, Florida, Ross joining us on the Republican line. Hi, Ross.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
These Republicans, I know exactly what's wrong with the GOP and everything like that. These Republican candidates that we have absolutely have little faith towards the average American working man. And everybody's all up and all over Donald Trump, not just because he's leading in the polls, but mainly because, you know, he's not a politician. Even Vladimir Putin said that he feels that his people have great respect for him because he's not a politician. So we need less politics. We need less politics in the White House and more people who represent what the Republican and Democratic parties have to offer, which that is a government for the people, by the people, for the people of the United States. And, you know, if they want to target a key thing in voters, or if they feel there's so many aspects to look at with it, they just simply don't know how to execute their planning. And Donald Trump's mainly publicity that I feel is just to take away from the true matters at hand. And, you know, that's just how it is.
Another Republican caller in Strasburg, Pennsylvania, William joining us.
Yes, just a minute, please. Marty? Marty?
Are you there, William?
One on.
We'll move on to Edward in Dayton, Ohio, on the line for Democrats. Edward, you'll get the last word here on the GOP presidential field and foreign policy.
Okay. Lindsey Graham is quite knowledgeable, has the right temperament, and I don't agree with most of his policies, but he's a real homeboy, real American, and I think he would make another Harry S. Truman. What do you think?
Doesn't matter what I think, it matters what you think, Edward. Thanks for calling, and thanks to all of our callers. Our Road to the White House coverage continues here on C-SPAN today.